Mark, thank you for your work on the charter changes. Glad that was a success for the city.
Yeah, I was really happy about it, especially the margin. But I remember when we did it in 2008, and the one thing that went down to defeat was to raise the mayor's salary from 12,000 to 24. No, from 24 to 28, and the city council from 12 to 24, and it failed miserably.
I have some comments that to me are funny in my head, but I'm sure they're not going to be funny, so I'm just going to keep it to myself.
So we were smart to not ask for a pay raise in my mind.
Yeah, unfortunately, but it's not that y'all don't earn it.
Yeah, it's sad that
what, like 6 cents a minute or something, or 6 cents an hour, I think. Yeah.
Luckily, I love what I do, so it's worth it.
We tremendously appreciate it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's sad that our public sees government officials and teachers is not worthy of good pay.
No. They truly are positions of dedication and, commitment to others. And somehow we don't think those folks need to make a livable wage or be able to pay a mortgage, I guess.
One of the fun things about my job is when people call at the local level and have a problem. And I never will forget my first phone call was a guy that said, "I've got a problem, Mark, can you help me?" And I said, "What's your problem?" I'm thinking it's going to be some big task. And he says, my big blue trash can's broken. I said, "I think I can help you with that one."
At least he didn't ask you to come pick up the trash.
Probably thought about it.
Yeah, that was probably his next ask if Mark said, "I can't help you with the big blue."
My other favorite one was, it was Thanksgiving, my first year in office, and this lady calls me crying. Her electricity's been out for like 4 days. And I said, "I'll make some calls and see what I can do." And I called OG&E, and her lights came back on 30 minutes later, which, as you know, I had nothing to do with that, but I never dissuaded her of the notion after she said she'd always vote for me.
Well, you probably get some undue blame, so might as well take a little bit of credit when it's not due.
Chair Crook, we are at 10:30.
Okay.
You may start with your script.
Okay. Thank you for joining us for the Maps for Citizens Advisory Board video conferencing meeting today. We have a few announcements to make regarding the video conferencing meeting before we get started. If the video conference is disconnected at any time during the meeting shall be stopped and reconvened once the video audio connection is restored. If communications are unable to be restored within 15 minutes, items remaining for consideration will be continued at 1:30 this afternoon via video conference. The agenda and documents are located on okc.gov. To speak on a certain agenda item, please call now 405-297-3467 or text your request to 405-205-4195. Include your name, the agenda item number, and the reason you would like to speak. Please submit your request prior to the beginning of the meeting to avoid receiving your request after the item has been considered. City staff will attempt to submit requests received during the meeting to process them to the meeting chair. To speak under comments by board staff or citizens, please call 405-297-3467 or text 405-205-4195. Again, please list your name, address, phone number, and the subject on which you wish to address the board. Thank you. Do we have a quorum?
Yes, you do, Madam Chair.
All righty, we will call the meeting to order. And the first item for consideration is approve minutes of the October 1st, 2020 MAPS for Citizens Advisory Board special meeting. Take a motion and second. Okay, we have a motion by Bob, second by Daisy. Please vote.
Chair, I'd vote yes. I'm having a little computer difficulty here in voting.
Okay, there we go.
I vote, this is Russell, I vote yes as well.
Thank you. Kevin? Kevin, are you there? Are you able to vote, or you can just verbally give us your vote?
It appears he might have fallen off of Zoom.
Okay,
Still in Prime Gov, but he's
okay.
Mark, this is Russell. Do you still show me in Prime Gov?
yes, sir. I show you in Prime Gov.
Okay, I seem to be unable to vote. I have the agenda up, but not the voting.
Okay. I think
Are you in live meeting?
Yes.
Okay.
Can you hit your escape button and see if that'll work? That's what brought it up for me.
Do you want me to show Mr. Guarnera as absent, or do you want to wait to see if he can get back on?
He just contacted me. He's had some technical issues and he's rebooting his computer.
Okay. So why don't we go ahead and just list him as absent, and because I don't want to hold the meeting for too long. Okay, the motion passed. Thank you. The next item on our agenda is to receive the MAPS for revenue and expenditure report ending October 26th, 2020. David?
Madam Chair, you have the revenue expenditure report, as you said, for the period ending October 26th. On the revenue side for the month, we have $9,323,204. I'm sorry, total on the month. That was just the sales tax. So on the total, $9,363,030 for a total on the revenue so far of $47,911,304. And then on the expenditures report, or expenditure side, you'll see that we've got our first expenditures, and that represents the ADG contract that was approved by council, and we have to encumber the entire amount, so it'll show up in total on the expenditures. So if you have any questions, I'll try to answer those.
David, this is Bob. Just a couple of questions. You said encumbered. Has that money actually been paid, or we just show it as encumbered and it's paid out over time?
Yes.
ADG.
The latter. We just show it as an expense, so that we know where we are on the books. But yes, it'll be paid out over time.
Okay, it's an annual contract, so it'll be paid each month.
Right. It'll go till July 1st of next year.
And also, am I remembering correctly? Your report shows that we're, of course, under target. As expected, but am I recalling correctly that we are closer to target this month than we were last?
I can't recall, Mr. Nealon. I'd have to look that up. Let me see here.
Seemed to me we were about 10% under target last month.
Yeah, it was 10.7 last month.
Okay, thank you.
So a little better.
We're gaining on it.
Right. Okay. If there's no more questions, I take a motion in a second. All right, Russell, thank you for your motion. Bob, please cast your votes. Allie, do we have you? There we go. And
Sorry about that. I was having a little internet trouble. Did you get it?
yes, thank you. Yep, we got
Awesome.
you. And it doesn't look like Kevin's joined us back, right?
No, I did not see him on the Zoom. Yes.
Okay. Well, darn it. Okay, motion's passed. Thank you so much. All righty, so next we will move to items for consideration, meeting schedule. So David, do you want to present that? But essentially we just need to adopt our meeting schedule for 2021.
Right. State law requires that we post the meeting schedule, or that we approve the meeting schedule. So this is for the coming year.
Okay, so it maintains the first Thursday of every month. Moved and seconded. All those in favor, please, or all those vote, please. Sorry. Outstanding. Great, motion passed. Fantastic, thank you. All right. So now we get to move to the fun part, the presentations. So this meeting, we're continuing with the presentations related to some of the specific projects. And first we will, David Todd will present the beautification presentation. David?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Carrie, go ahead and pull that up. So as Chair said, this is a presentation on beautification. I think we all know that beauty's in the eye of the beholder, but for the most part, we'll try to describe it here. So the idea behind the beautification piece of MAPS 4 is that we want to address areas where we've fallen a little short. Lots of times we'll do new streets and budgets are such that we just build the street and we don't do anything other than curb and paving and maybe squeeze in some sidewalks. So a lot of this beautification, the only way it's going to get done is through a program like MAPS. And beautification really has a lot to do with first impressions with people as they come into the city. So some ideas ideas of what we've done in the past is maybe like the 1% for art ordinance. So that requires 1% of the construction estimate to be used for art. You've probably seen that on trails. Where you're going to see that most this month is the fantastic art piece that we have in the MAPS 3 Convention Center. It's in the 2 atriums. You can see it from outside. I think that you'll agree that it is a great addition to the convention center. But then partnerships like Oklahoma City Beautiful, we try to do some things. And then a few special projects like Skydance Bridge. So Skydance Bridge could have been a very utilitarian bridge across the highway, but instead it was seen that we could do a project like that you're seeing there now. So that also with in recent years, ODOT has started to do some of their projects and add a few little beautification aspects to it. You'll see along the wall here and some of the other projects where you've got the buffalo or the various designs in the walls. Well, we've already moved to that picture there where you can see the different designs and colors that are within the highways that you see now. So next slide, Carrie. So many of the highway arterial corridors haven't been treated that way, and some of, as you see, they're called left behind corridors. So the type of beautification that we're envisioning here can be addressed within maps. Next slide, please. So here's an example. This is I-44. You can see there's just blank walls there, concrete walls. Only an engineer like me could really appreciate and enjoy that. But next slide. Some of the other places look similar to that. So some of the areas that we're looking at are like city entrance gateways. I think we can all agree that the Will Rogers World Airport area, when you first get off the plane, your first introduction to Oklahoma City is less than inspirational and pretty plain. So it's those kind of areas we're looking at. The Clara Lupa corridor, I-240 has been issue for many years, even as it turns around and goes to I-44. We've got the OCU corridor, the Reno corridor between Bricktown and the American Indian Cultural Center, the First American Center, is very industrial, and that's something that can be worked on to try and hide some of that. You know, the original thought years ago, and I mean 40 years ago, was put all the ugly stuff by the highway because nobody wants to be, by the highway because it's loud, not realizing that that's basically the front door. People drive through town and all they see is junk. They think your whole city is junk.
Right.
And so then the I-35 and I-44 bridges over the river are pretty nondescript. We can do some things on those, even if it's just some pillars or some paint or something to spruce them up a little bit. There's 3 South Oklahoma City pedestrian bridges. There's one at I-240, and then there's 2 on I-44 that have been there since early 60s when they first built I-44. And I don't know if most of you know, but I-44 cut the original Woodson Park in half, and those bridges were put there to try and bridge the parks, but they're not very inspirational. So public art, monuments at intersections, something that big cities do that we haven't done. So we're looking at that. And then easy to maintain landscaping on key arterial medians. And then trees. It's ironic that we're talking about trees since we just got so many, I think I can say millions of trees destroyed, but
Timely.
this state is tough on trees. But yes, we can look at an investment in replacing those trees. Next slide. So there's one of the pedestrian bridges over I-44 at Woodson Park. You can see that it is a very antiquated design. I think the mayor in his presentation described it as a cattle chute. Next slide. And again, an area that's very important to the city right here at the Capitol through the whole state building area is less than inspirational with the water stained walls and minimal lighting. So this is an area that we could look at sprucing up. Next slide. And this is a picture of the bridges over the river that I mentioned. Maybe just replacing that guardrail and doing some pillars or something. Obviously, we're not going to replace the bridge with this budget, but we can make it look better. Everybody's renovated a piece of their house, and just some paint and a little something here and there really makes a difference. Next slide. And then this is the area right there at Will Rogers. You got a chain link fence and a access road and a billboard. So I know that we can do better, and hopefully with this money we can do that. Next slide. So the other aspect is $5 million within the investment fund for operational funds to perpetually fund 2 to 3 staff positions. So what was talked about at council was that whenever there's a downturn in the budget, some of the first things to go are parks and a position like this. And this way it will be perpetually funded and won't have to take a hit whenever the general budget or general fund gets trimmed a little bit here. So 2 or 3 people, and these people would be involved in the public-private capital projects. Maybe they can pursue grants, coordinate with OKC Beautiful, maybe do some of the neighborhood meetings, be troubleshooters for mowing, graffiti, just be that person that does all the beautification within Oklahoma City, kind of a liaison, if you will. So next sheet. So what we have is $25 million in projects and then the $5 million operating fund. So that represents about $200,000 a year, $200,000 a year as far as the return from the investment fund on that $5 million is what we're expecting. So I hope that gives you an idea of what the beautification is. I think it's kind of self-explanatory, but that's the goals. There's no real plans right now. We don't know if it's going to be this or that. And as we go through the subcommittee process and bring it to you, we will basically invent those designs and those things that need to be done at the various locations in those general corridors. So that's the presentation. It's kind of short and sweet. If anybody has any questions, I'll be glad to try and answer.
Questions for David?
David, this is Russell Pace. I was just curious how the money flows into the 5 million to provide for the employees. Does that come before the project or during the project?
Well, it'll be part of the implementation plan, and it is designated completely separate of the projects. So you're not going to see it taken out of each of the projects. More than likely, we'll take the 5 million in one chunk and separate it out and send it to the investment fund, to the trust over there where they can manage it. But remember also, on top of this, for public buildings and parks, those projects like that, we will still have the 1% for art, which will come out of our construction budget. So that'll be on top of this money.
Right.
Very good. Thank you.
Other questions for David? Okay.
All right, thanks.
All right. Thank you so much, David. Next on our agenda is a presentation on the animal shelter, and John Gary, Supervisor of Animal Welfare, is with us to make that presentation. Welcome.
Thank you guys for having me. I'm excited to present this and looking forward to being part of the MAPS 4 projects. You can go into the next slide. So, you know, the current building and facility that we're in was done about 2001, and really at the time it really wasn't designed for life saving. And so really what the purpose of this new building is the changes that we've made over the last 2 decades, and in particularly the last 7 or 8 years or so, where we really become more of a resource-based for our customers and for the animals and for our community. And then it's ultimately life-saving. You can go ahead and bring all of those points up. Currently, the current facility is, it's really, well, if you've ever been here, it's very prison-like. And so really trying to enhance the experience for our animals and our customers was on the forefront of this project. Address operational inefficiencies. One of the things that when this building was built, we've learned a lot in animal welfare, and frankly, a lot of the things that were used material-wise and those kind of things that were to build the building itself they haven't lasted, they haven't upheld like they should, and they really weren't the proper design of what should be used when building in an animal shelter. And then once again, remove impediments to humane outcomes for our live release rate goals. You know, we set the goal of a 90% live release rate here in Oklahoma City a few years ago, and we really started down the road of our life saving back in 2007. But over the last couple of years, we've made a tremendous amount of improvements in that area, and really the facility that we're currently in some ways impedes our ability to save lives, because the biggest challenge we have to getting animals out of the animal shelter alive is keeping them healthy while they're here. and the building plays an important part of that. So go ahead to the next slide. As you see, this is the existing facility, and you can see why I said it's very prison-like. You notice there's no windows. We have a barbed wire fence that wraps the entire facility. It's very much prison-like, and these are the kind of things that we're trying to, we want to have a facility that people want to come to, and it's very important for our life saving that our community understands that we are a place to come to look for your pet, to look for resources for your pet, and frankly, having a nice facility that people want to come to is an important part of that. You can go into the next slide. This kind of gives our history here. The first to the far left, what you see there is a remnants of the shelter that was actually here when I got here in 1999. It was very, old drafty building. It was hard to keep cool, hard to keep heated in the summer or the winter months. And so that facility was construction began on a new facility in 1995. And then the final phase of that construction project was done in 2001, which is the current building that we sit in and see today. Since 2001, we did have a couple of different renovation projects. In 2008, we added an area for cats because, believe it or not, when they originally built this building, they didn't build a place for cats. Cats were actually kept inside the same rooms as dogs, which was a horrible design to begin with. And so in 2008, we were fortunate enough to address that issue and build a separate area for our cats to go into. But it is relatively small compared to the number of cats that we see every year. And once again, the design is not up to modern standards for cats and keeping them healthy in the building. And then in 2015, we had a project in our kennel areas where we replaced all the kennels and the epoxy flooring. Again, this was an effort to try to take an inadequate facility and make it to where it could help increase life saving. And so we did do these projects. The one thing that I will say is while our new kennels, they're much prettier than our old ones for sure. The problem with them is they're much too small. When we did that project in 2015, we had just enough funding to replace what was already there. And so we replaced kennels that were too small with more kennels that were too small. So if you've ever been to our facility, you'll see our kennels are really small. Most of the time, due to the number of animals in our building, the kennels have to have more than one dog in them at a time. And they're really not designed for that. They are really designed to only house one dog at a time. And so we face overcrowding issues frequently, and at most times are overcrowded in our dog populations. You can go to the next slide. So we're going to talk about some of the insufficiencies that we have. Go ahead and go to the next slide. The first and foremost, when we talk about life saving, the current existing building has 37 spaces for our dogs available for adoption. We average 100 to 120 dogs available for adoption at any given time. So you can see our adoption area is far too small. Most of the dogs are doubled up. And then also we have to intermingle dogs that are available for adoption with dogs that are waiting to see if an owner comes and gets them. Dogs are on their stray holding period, which also is a bad thing because those are also animals that haven't been evaluated for health and concerns and those kind of things. And so we've got dogs that are presumably healthy available for adoption that are mixed in with dogs that may not be healthy. And so it's just a bad situation. We currently do it that way, again, in order to try to save more lives, but ultimately it's something that we need to address if we want to be able to sustain a long projected life saving for our dogs and cats for that matter. Go ahead to the next slide. Safety is a big concern in our public areas, in particularly if you've ever been to our building. This picture that you see there is our front lobby area. Every animal that comes into the building and goes out of the building goes out of this very, very small area. As you can see, we have about 90,000 visitors a year to our shelter. So on any given day, we average somewhere between 300 and 400. On Saturdays, which is our busiest day of the week, we may have up to 600 visitors here at the shelter. So as you can see, this lobby, there's only about 10 feet from the front counter to the door. And when you have that volume of people coming into the building, that has that small of a lobby, it's just a bad situation. It also causes a lot of safety concerns because animals are coming in and out of there. And so trying to keep animals and dogs separated that are not familiar with each other, it can become a dangerous situation at times too for our public. So it's important that we address that through this project. There's no designated area for our intake exam. Currently, the animals, they come in, they go into this room, and they're literally using a janitor closet to do the intake exam on the dogs as they come in. And so our staff does the best they can with the current situation, but obviously that's not ideal. You know, intake exams, there should be a designated area, a true exam room where the veterinary staff can really look at animals as they come in our building and make sure that that they're healthy, they get medical things that they need as they come in our door. And once again, dogs and cats are in the same room as when they come in the building, and so that's a bad situation, just not safe for staff or public for that matter. And comfort. If you ever come to our front lobby, it's a very stressful situation, long lines, lots of animals. When animals enter the building, it's very important that their first experience in our building is as less stressful as possible. Once again, it's about keeping them healthy so that we can get a positive outcome and save their life. And so it's very loud and it's very unwelcoming when you walk into our front. Next slide. Our animal control program, we have 19 field officers, but they have no designated workspace. We actually built a building in 2001, an animal control facility, and didn't build any space for our animal control program. So our officers are actually we have a training room that we've put up some cubicles and they're working in this area. And so they don't have, our officers do investigations where we have customers that come in and citizens that come in to sign citations, and we interview for cruelty cases or dangerous cases. And there's really no area for them to actually go and visit with these people privately. Nor is there a workspace for the officers to do their jobs. And so I think we've done an okay job of these makeshift areas, but it's something that we really need to address. We need to have an area for our animal control officers to work out of and be able to do their jobs and do their interview and investigations. Go to the next slide. Our veterinary services program, I'm very proud of our veterinary services program. The work that they do with the number of staff in there and what we have to work with is pretty amazing, but it's definitely an area that needs to be improved. It's far too small. We average about 25 to 30 spay neuter surgeries a day, and that's just our spay neuter surgeries that our veterinarian staff does. They also have to do cruelty exams and a lot of other different types of exams for animals that come in that have medical needs. There's really no real good area to do that. We have a very small exam room area that's designed, that's not really designed to handle the volume and all the stuff that needs to be done. We don't have an area to do x-rays, for instance, so we don't have an x-ray machine, and our staff frequently deal with cars that are hit, or animals that are hit by cars, things like that. We really need an area where we can do x-rays and make sure that we can provide the animal what they need medically to ensure that they're being taken care of properly when they're in the shelter. And then fortunately, sometimes it ends up being animals are euthanized that may not necessarily need to be, just because we do not have the capability of ensuring that they're okay. And so sometimes for humane reasons, they have to be euthanized, where if we had x-ray equipment, we could really get a proper diagnosis for that animal. Proper diagnostics for the area for blood work and microscope. But I hate to say this, but the current area that's being used is actually our same area that our staff does. They eat their lunch, they work on their office work that they have to do, paperwork and those kind of things. And so we just don't have a proper area for doing blood work and microscope work and all of that. Our veterinary clinic has no incoming patient holding area. So all the animals are having to be kept in the regular kennel areas, and then as being seen, being walked to the clinic back and forth, which is very work. There's a lot of work that comes into that for staff, and frankly, animals that are under veterinary care should be by the veterinarian, not across the building where they can't keep close eyes on them. And then we need a pre and post-op holding area, which we currently don't have. We have one room that's been kind of makeshift, but it's too small for the volume of animals that we do. We can only house probably about 10 animals or so in that area. And like I said, we do about 25 to 30 surgeries a day and sometimes more. Next slide. Holding, once again, we need proper flooring. The current flooring that we have isn't conducive to being able to properly be disinfected. There's a lot of cracks and crevices and things that hold disease. We need more kennels, larger kennels. We have about 240 dog kennels in our shelter right now, and we typically house somewhere between 300 and 400 dogs. And so we need more kennels and then larger kennels so that they're adequate space for the animals to keep appropriate stress levels and be able to provide them enrichment and things like that. Proper isolation areas, that's another thing. We don't have, when animals do come into our building and they could be contagious to other animals, we don't have a proper isolation area to put them in. So, and sometimes they are kept with animals that, once again, that are presumably healthy. Outside play areas, that once again, it's about keeping animal stress levels and being able to go outside, get out of the building, is an important part of that. We have what we call a Dogs Playing for Life program where the dogs get outside and play and interact and run, and that's an important part of what they do. But the areas that we currently have are inadequate for the number of dogs that we have in our building. Layout is not public friendly, and if you've ever been to our shelter, you can see it's very boxy. Once again, I keep comparing it to a prison, but that's the best way I know to do it. It's very hard to find your way around. It's very square, and there's a bunch of different rooms. It really needs to have a more public friendly layout to be able to maneuver through the building and understand where they're going. And then once again, like I talked about earlier, need shelter friendly construction materials. The building has a lot of things like, for instance, we have steel frames and steel doors all throughout the building. Well, our kennels have to be sprayed down with water. So anytime you have that, metal and that much humidity and that much water being sprayed, we have a lot of door frames that are rusted, doors that are rusted. We actually have doors that you could actually see through to the outside right now in our shelter because they've rusted through. And so we need more shelter-friendly construction materials. Next slide. Demonstrated success. You can go ahead and go to the next slide. We'll talk about that. And once again, I talk a lot about our live release rate. 2019, we had our one of our best years that we've ever had in our fiscal year. We saved 86% of the animals that come into our building. This year, currently, we're at 88%. And so we're on our way to that 90% live release rate. But this new building is going to not only help us get to that 90% live release rate, but maintaining it is going to be the biggest challenge. Once we get there, we know that about 10% of the animals that come into our building are not savable, either due to their temperament is just not good enough to place back out in the community or to health. But we do believe that we should be saving 9%, and that animals should not be losing their lives because we don't have space to keep them or we don't have the proper facility to keep them in. And so this building is going to help us address that and help us achieve that 90% live release rate. But once again, it's more than just achieving it. Having this building is going to help us be able to maintain it after we get there. Next slide. And our investment is 38 million as what we have allotted for our shelter. We believe that with that amount of money, we can build not only the proper facility, but really we'll have one of the best municipal facilities in the entire country when this is all said and done. And so the proposed new shelter, once again, it's going to incorporate best practices and what we know about sheltering today. Current facility is about 42,000 square feet. The new facility is going to go up to about 67. So we're looking at a much larger facility. Once again, we're addressing the issues of not having enough kennels for the dogs in particular, and also more space for the cats. Welcoming structure for humans and animals. Our facility is not very welcoming. And it's really about the staff that have to work in the building too. Keeping staff mentally okay in this field of work is difficult. And so having a building that's more welcoming, more friendly, just better for the humans as well is important so that we can keep our staff mentally okay as well. And then park-like setting and environment. Once again, we want to create a place that people want to come to look for their pets. And only about 13% of the animals that come into our facilities are reclaimed by their owners every year. And a lot of that, we believe, is because our shelter is not a place that people think of to come. And we really want to change that. The next slide. As you can see, we've kind of, these are just drawings that we had done, just so you could get a feel for what it is that we're looking for and what we're looking at doing. You can see it's much more modern, much more friendly, with separate entrances for adoptions and then intakes of animals, so that we're not intermingling animals coming in versus animals that are going out, as well as an entrance area for our clinic area, which right now our clinic area is very difficult to go to. It's in the middle of the building, and you have to walk through almost the entire shelter just to get to it. So that is the exterior. You can go to the next slide. Oh, and once again, as you can see, we're addressing the window issue. You know, a lot of clear, a lot of windows, a lot of natural lighting. Once again, it's about making a better environment for the animals and people that have to come here. Go ahead to the next slide, and then I'll be happy to answer any questions that anyone may have about the new shelter.
John, thank you. I think you do a really great job of presenting the current situation and the compelling need to address the animal shelter. So thank you. So I think, did I hear Shay? Do you have a question?
Yes, I do. Thank you. And thank you, John, for that really detailed presentation. I did wonder, you had mentioned the noise level, and I thought of that just because I have been there. And do you think that, you also mentioned construction materials. Will some of those materials maybe mitigate the noise, or do you think that maybe having more kennels spread over a different area, that would help?
Yeah, there's actually a couple different things that we've discovered now in animal welfare and sheltering that we know now that we didn't know then. And really, one of the things, the first thing is we'll have more kennels, but we'll have less kennels per room. So, you know, you're less dogs in there, obviously will reduce the volume there. And then also there's a lot more sound things that are placed in the room, softer materials that also reduce that noise level that they're now using in modern sheltering that we will have in this one.
And do you have somebody who is monitoring or researching or developing best practices for animal welfare, or is that person you?
Well, I mean, I have learned quite a bit over the years, and I can definitely tell you what not to do when building a shelter from after being through these two that we've been through. But thankfully now there are actual architects that specialize in the building of shelters, and then we can use those people to help us design and use as consultants to ensure that we're doing things the right way. And we're very lucky that our industry's evolved into where that's available to us now, where it wasn't 20 years ago.
John, this is Bob Nealon. If we're looking at a brand new shelter as opposed to expanding and renovating the current facility, what do you have in mind in terms of location? And is there funding for land acquisition within that 34 million budget?
So we have about 17 acres on our current property. So we actually believe we can build the new shelter on the same property, and then we would demo this one. Okay. Because of the way our city is, we cannot move, we can't get rid of this shelter till the new one's built, because the animals have nowhere to go because of the volume that we see. But we are fairly confident that's going to fit on this property. I will say, if for some reason it cannot, we would have to look at some other property. But we've had some ideas with currently city-owned property, so we're hoping that we won't have to use any of that 38 million to purchase land.
Okay, thank you.
This is Mark Stonecipher, and I just wanted to kind of echo on what Bob just asked you, and that is, you gave a good chronology of the history of the shelters dating back to 1995, your arrival in 1999, the 2001 shelter, renovations in 2008 and 2015. Just so I understand, as far as the current shelter is concerned, are there any materials, products that are salvageable that will be used in the new facility, or will everything be demolished and we just start all anew?
Everything will probably be demolished, just because the way it was built just wasn't up to par. There's just not much worth keeping. We did talk about a renovation of this shelter versus building a new shelter at the time, but because of the extensiveness of the renovation, it literally is probably would be just as expensive to build a new one as it is to tear out everything that would have to be done in the current one. And so that's the reason why we went that route.
And the other question, the 2001 shelter, how many acres does it sit on approximately?
I'm sorry, Councilman, you're I couldn't hear your volume is.
Yeah. The 2001 shelter, how many acres does that sit on approximately?
17. Our property is 17 acres that we sit on now.
As far as the 17 acres are concerned, some of it is vacant, correct?
Correct. Yeah, we have a large, field area that's just to the east of where the shelter currently sits, and then a little bit to the north
So
as
the
well.
shelter sits on less than 17 acres. It's
Correct. Yeah, the property is 17 acres, but the shelter itself takes up far less than that. We have probably 13 or so that's currently nothing on.
Thank you very much.
John, this is Russell Pace. Did I understand correctly that the existing facility was built in 2001?
Yeah, the first phase started in 95 and opened in 98, and then the second phase finished in 2001. So the full project ended in 2001. We've been in it since then.
Russell, did you have another question?
No, really, it's more of a comment. It seems, to a gentleman that's in real estate his whole life, to tear down a building that new and not reuse it for any purpose seems, I don't know. What's the word I'm looking for? Doesn't seem like good policy.
Mm-hmm.
But I understand if a building's obsolete as far as its use, that it makes sense to demo it.
Okay.
Hopefully that's something that our subcommittee will look at and address.
That's what I'm thinking is the subcommittee might, in their review and work, and as working with the consultants that John referenced and the engineers, may be able to think through the existing facility or other options.
Right, or perhaps repurpose it. I mean, it's
Right.
a huge building.
Right. Yep. And it is an advantage that it's all city-owned property, so not having to work with other landowners. So, other questions for John or comments?
One other quick question, John. The facility itself and the parking area, how much of the 17 acres do you anticipate will be used for that?
That's a good question. Actually, our parking lot for our city vehicles is probably larger than the one for the public, just because we have a fairly large fleet of vehicles. So as far as the exact acreage, I'm not sure. We have about 150 parking spots for the public right now, and then probably around just about that same amount for our city vehicles as well.
Okay. Are there any plans to add field agents? The number of field agents from 19, increasing that?
Not as far as this project goes. There's not. I mean, we hope to be able to do that at some point in time in the future, but it's not part of this project.
Thank you.
This is Shay. I just might add a comment. John, like I said, I had been there before, and I just want to say the staff there are I was so impressed with them, and especially now since I know some of the issues you all are dealing with. So I just wanted to include that.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Other comments or questions for John?
Thank you, John. Good presentation.
Thank
Yes,
you.
Thanks, John.
I would echo Shay's comment. Please share with your staff. I think now that we know a little bit more of what they're dealing with on a day-to-day basis, their commitment to our four-legged members of our community is even more appreciated and respected.
Thank you. I'll definitely do that.
All right. Thanks so much. So our next presentation is the bike lanes, trails, sidewalks, and street light bike plan, OKC plan, that Jeff Butler, Planning Director, is going to present. So are you there?
I'm here.
Fantastic. Take it away. This is really a great plan that we get to be a part of and add to. So. Okay.
Well, thank you for the opportunity to present to this group. Again, Jeff Butler, Planning Director. So I'll take you through bike lanes, trails, sidewalks, and then I'll hand it over to David for the streetlights conversation at the end. So we'll cover a lot of ground today, including the plan itself, Bike Walk OKC, which is our newest, well, not our newest plan anymore, but one of our newer plans that's already getting a lot of work and a lot of production out of that plan. So first of all, we'll talk about active transportation. So active transportation is essentially almost everything but a car, and it can include buses, anything you walk to buses, you cycle when you're using buses oftentimes, but obviously it's the pedestrian system, the sidewalks, it's the bike lanes, the different types of bike lanes, including trails and on-street facilities, economic, sorry, that got ahead of myself there. But all of these things are important because they can help us improve our physical health. People, birds fly, people walk, and nowadays we also drive and we cycle, but kind of getting back to what keeps us healthy and what we've been doing for thousands of years is walking and keeping our bodies and minds healthy. And so that's why we like to call it active transportation. As you know, it's been a push in the city for a while now. And I'll get into that a little bit more as we go through here. But in addition to the physical health, mental health, I alluded to, economic health, environmental health. So the more we can use active forms of transportation, the more we're able to clean up our air, the more we're able to have more vibrant communities, more dense communities, commercial areas, for example, that rely less on a car and are closer together, and just kind of, it aids in placemaking, helps us make places that people want to be, rather than places they just want to drive to and get away from. So we can go to the next slide, please. So Bike Walk OKC is, like I said, one of our newer plans. It was adopted in 2018, and it's our first comprehensive bike and pedestrian master plan. It's a long-range plan. I like to call it, actually, it's kind of a short-term and a long-term plan. It is very detailed. It has specific projects that are prioritized, and we're building those projects now. So because of the timing of the plan, while it was adopted in 2018, the projects, we had identified the projects much sooner than that. So they were able to go into the 2017 bond and the sales tax issuance that we had, or the bond issuance and the sales tax that the voters approved. And so we are actually building a lot of those projects right now. You started to see some of those come online in terms of the bike facilities. The sidewalks were a little further ahead on. Those are being built all across the city. So Bike Walk OKC has been a tremendous way to identify projects, keep us organized and moving forward in a way that makes sense and prioritizes the location where we do all these things, because we do have limited funds. That's always the problem. And so prioritizing these infrastructure improvements to put them in the most effective places first is really what it's all about. So what we want to do, oops, sorry, I've got my own notes here and went backwards. So Bike Walk OKC had a lot of contributors. We go to the next slide. Thank you. And you can see that there were a whole lot of organizations that helped out. We had a steering committee, we had a resident survey, we had a lot of public meetings and stakeholder meetings. We had a lot of just general outreach and public meetings. We also had the public review, a draft. And the steering committee was a cross-section of public sector, private sector, nonprofit organizations. And we coordinated with the Public Works Department, Parks and Rec, the Mayor's Office, ACOG, Embark, and the Police Department. All these representatives or organizations were represented. And so with that and all of the input we received, we felt like we have a really good solid plan that represents all of our needs across the whole city. So if we can go to the next slide. I will mention that the survey results, you know, we know this is on people's minds. Less than 10% of the survey respondents rated our bike and ped conditions as satisfactory. So in other words, more than 90% feel like it's that we need a lot of improvement for our bike and pedestrian systems. So we obviously have a mandate to get things improved. So here are the goals that we have: to make walking and cycling safe in Oklahoma City, to increase the number of people walking and cycling for transportation. We have a pretty low, just the amount of people that are walking and cycling for in the city is very low, in the neighborhood of 1%, to commute and to actually get to places that are non-recreational. So we would like to, of course, see that increase. And that comes through providing safe and comfortable facilities that people can feel comfortable walking or cycling on. So we want to connect neighborhoods to jobs, public transit, commercial districts, schools, and parks. And we just want to remove barriers. And most of the time, those barriers, you know, sometimes they're physical, like I can't get across that freeway. But a lot of times they're less obvious. You know, it's just that, well, the sidewalk ends here, or for whatever reason, maybe there is sidewalk, but it doesn't feel safe, or it's not in good shape. So those are the goals that we need to accomplish through the continued implementation of Bike Walk OKC. So we can go to the next slide. This is in a nutshell, what Bike Walk OKC covers, kind of the main initiatives that it has. So on the top left there, you see the crosstown corridors, and those are major bike lanes that are kind of the beginnings of a citywide network. We have downtown walkability, that's obviously critical, a lot of, you know, to the functioning of a good downtown. Bicycle and pedestrian bridges, just addressing some of those barriers that we talked about earlier, and that David talked about earlier, with some of those bridges that aren't the best and aren't the most attractive, and people don't necessarily want to walk across an old bridge that, you know, is super noisy and not very comfortable. Neighborhood greenways, so that's a new thing in this plan. They're basically trails, but we've planned, and that's when I mentioned earlier that the plan was intended to be both short-term and long-term. That's one of the longer-term goals. There are a lot of, as you know, Oklahoma City has a lot of nice riparian areas that oftentimes will go through or next to neighborhoods, and we'd like to utilize those kind of built-in corridors as trailways to help kids get from their house to their friend's house, to school, for people to just, recreate and exercise on. And those would then connect with our main trail systems. Multi-use trails, that's, just our trail system that we've been working on for a while now. We've made good progress through MAPS 3 and bond projects and other initiatives. And so that is the kind of the backbone of the system that we want to continue to obviously maintain, but improve through the addition of amenities and additional miles of trail and connections to it. And finally, a couple more things. The Grand Boulevard Linear Park, that was, the Grand Boulevard concept was established many, many years ago. And we want to connect that through some of these missing pieces, such as the Deep Fork Trail, which is now in progress and hopefully going to be starting construction soon. And finally, the pedestrian priority areas, I'll get into a little bit later and explain those in a little bit more detail. So if we can go to the next slide, we'll talk about bicycle and trail planning. If you want to go ahead and move on. So we analyzed the existing bike network. We wanted to know where people currently ride, and we just got a lot of input. We did a lot of analysis. We looked at all kinds of things such as accident rates and the condition of intersections, and took in a lot of input to make this plan. But it proposes the expansion of the existing network, resulting in just many, many miles of new facilities that would be on and off street bike facilities. So it expands the network and would upgrade the current facilities so that people can just connect to different destinations and have a safe cycling experience. What you see here on the screen is one of the maps. So we've got a citywide bicycling master plan. And this is what you see here is the on-street network that proposes different types of those facilities. And I'll talk in a minute about the different types, but they're broken up into, of course, the trails, but then the on-street facilities would be the tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3, depending on the type of street that you're on and the level of safety that is required, and also the level of traffic. So if we can go to the next slide. Just a few, there are a lot of kind of design considerations in the plan, just helping us to guide what these facilities will look like. This is one example of how we would determine, what type of facility should be on a given street. Is it okay if it's just a shared facility, or in other words, a sharrow, or does it need something further? Does it need an actual bike lane? Does it need a delineated bike lane, or does it need to be off street? Does it need to be a trail? So it all depends on, the width of the road, the volume of traffic, and the speed of the traffic. Those are all variables that have resulted in the map you saw a second ago. So we go to the next slide, I'll show you those tiers. So tier 1 is the highest level of protection. So you can see those images there on the left. You've got some striping as a buffer and some delineators, some flexible delineators. If you go down Walker, you can see some examples of those now that were just recently installed. And you can also see examples over on EK Gaylord. So that project is something that is progressing, and because of the different funding sources for that corridor, it's kind of coming along in chunks, but in a few months, that whole thing from downtown all the way to the fairgrounds will be complete as a tier 1 facility. So that's great because it provides an access point into downtown for a lot of people to use. And it's got some uses along there that for folks that really could use, including a school and some other social services that really could utilize that facility, as well as people commuting into downtown. And it does connect to our new trail over by the fairgrounds. So that's precisely what Bike Walk intended, to have these on-street facilities that connect people to, from their homes to trails to other destinations such as their workplaces or shopping or whatever it might be. And then tier 2 is just a traditional bike lane, which like you see downtown. So it doesn't have delineators, it's just a stripe, and those are for streets that are lower speeds and kind of moderate traffic levels. And then tier 3 you see on the right there, and they're the sharrow that I mentioned earlier, those markings. we call those shared facilities. So the markings are there visible for both cyclists and automobile drivers, so that they know that, you know, hey, watch out for cyclists. This is a shared facility. The cyclist might be riding right in front of you. Tier 3 are typically on streets that are, you know, our lowest traffic volumes and our lowest speeds. They're safer. Cyclists should feel comfortable just riding in the street. A lot of those are just through residential neighborhoods on what we call connector streets. So that's an explanation of what you are starting to see now and what you'll be seeing over the next several years as we implement Bike Walk OKC through MAPS 4. If we go to the next slide. So I'll just cover through there. We have several maps here, just you can kind of get a feel for what's going on in the city. These are existing bicycle facilities, and really, really most of this is just a bike route, you know, that is just a sign. In some cases, it'll have a sharrow on, you know, off to the right. So we're really trying to up our game and get to the next level. So even a facility like that, we're moving the sharrows. We're putting them in the middle of the road. We're making them higher visibility with contrasting background. We're putting them more frequently. We're taking them off of streets that are high volume and high speed. There's just going to be a lot of Bike Walk OKC kind of is a big shift in the way we do things. So next slide, we'll talk about the proposed facilities. And let me catch up with myself here. And these are the kind of the main facilities, on-street facilities that are proposed in Bike Walk OKC. So it doesn't really talk about whether they're funded or not, but you can see that there's a pretty vast network that covers most of our urban area. And we're starting from downtown and we're moving out along these north, south, and east-west corridors that I mentioned earlier, and then we'll start to develop a bigger network. Next slide. So these are the 2017 bond funded facilities. As I mentioned a second ago, the crosstown connections. So the north, south, and east, west. So you can go all the way from, you know, the very east side of our city in Ward 7 all the way to Lake Overholser. And north to south, you can get from pretty far north all the way down to the Moore area, and takes you through downtown. So, and that's all, well, not all of it. I should clarify that we have bond funding. It's not going to fund all of that, but it's going to fund a lot of it. We're essentially starting from downtown and going east and west and north and south as far as we can with the funding we have. So we anticipate we'll need additional funds for that through MAPS 4. Next slide. Here are some additional bike facilities funded through the sales tax. And as you know, Better Street, Safer City was our brand for both bond and sales tax. That sales tax ended right as MAPS 4 funding began. And so we got a lot, we were over, we exceeded our collections, which is great. So we were able to fund a lot of good projects. And you can see the purple there is kind of starting to fill in a bit of a network. So we're just getting started, and you can see the beginnings of a network there. And those are all in various stages of design and construction. We've got a little bit of construction going on, but you'll start to see that pick up in 2021. Next slide, please. So then we have some federal grants, which is helping us build additional facilities. Next slide. And we're always looking for federal money. That's just something we always do. So we can maximize the mileage that we get. Next slide, please. So this is just kind of a summary slide showing you everything that you've seen all combined into one. And you can see that there's still a long ways to go. The proposed facilities, there's a lot there that's not funded, and that we need to work on over the coming years and even decades. And MAPS 4, the funds that we have can get us a lot of the way there. And we're just excited to be able to have this plan that we're able to get get adopted right at the right time, and that we can refresh a little bit and continue this momentum with MAP 4 funds. So the cost estimate, the next slide, if you can go to that, the general cost per mile, here's what we're looking at for bike facilities. It's 350,000 to 550,000 per mile. And the reason for that is you almost always need some level of resurfacing. We wish it was, and early on, we kind of hoped that we would see more instances where we could just go there and paint striping, but unfortunately, it's almost always the case where you've got to go there and resurface or put in some significant patching, because you have to make those bike lanes, which are often to the side of they're always to the side, and so that's kind of where the pavement tends to degrade at first, and so there's just always a lot of work to make those bike lanes high quality like we want them to be. And for whatever reason, that green paint is not cheap. They put in there some pretty good stuff to make it highly visible and provide some traction. And the application of it requires, depending on the type you use, sometimes they put on these panels that they heat on to the street so that they last a really long time. And that stuff is expensive. Next slide. So I'll talk about trails, and then I'll finish up with sidewalks. But here are the existing trails that you're probably all familiar with. They're kind of the backbone of our system right now. Next slide. There are some trails that are funded now mostly through the sales tax, but they're kind of a hodgepodge of different funding sources. Including, so the most notable is the Deep Fork Trail, and it's like I mentioned earlier, trying to complete that Grand Boulevard loop. The Deep Fork Trail is expensive because of all the issues, the engineering issues, the grade, the bridges that are going to be needed, and retaining walls and all of that. But fortunately, we have the funding to do it, and we're going to be able to complete that. There are some others that you see, some necessary trail to make a connection at Lake Hefner to other facilities, and a few other extensions that you see to help make that Grand Boulevard Trail work. Next slide. So these are proposed trails. This is another thing, trails are expensive. And so this is a very long-term plan, but we hope as the city grows and expands over the decades that we can get a lot of this done so that people can connect to a trail from their neighborhoods. Some of what you see here in the purple are greenfield now. That is, there's nothing developed out there, that we just have designated those so that when development does happen, we know to reserve space for them. Others are in existing residential areas that we would like to go back in and add trail there. It's, these open spaces that already exist, these corridors that just make sense. And so that's the long-term plan. Next slide, please. So here are the needs for the trail system, the existing trail system. We tended, when we built the existing trail system, just to focus on getting as many miles as possible. And so, there are a lot of folks who have been working for years to get some amenities added, water stations, lighting, seating, restrooms, shade structures and trees, wayfinding and signage, and of course resurfacing at the top there. We actually spent a fair amount of money, most of the funds actually from the sales tax that went to trails went to resurfacing needs. So that's a perennial need that we need to keep on top of. And we have a wayfinding and signage plan that's going to be, that's funded, it's designed, and that you'll start seeing that on the trails. So we're excited about that. New trails that we build will have these amenities. That's a commitment that we're making. And for example, the Deep Fork Trail will have the amenities. So we're trying to just, you know, like I said, get to the next level in terms of the way we build these facilities and how we do them. Next slide, please. So I mentioned that they're expensive. Here's the cost for just the addition of amenities at the top there. And on the bottom is all inclusive. So the estimated cost for new trails, a cost per mile, on average, that's kind of the range, you know, 1.2 to 1.6 million. So it's not cheap, and the Deep Fork Trail is more expensive than that, but it's definitely an outlier because of where it's located. But the Community and Neighborhood Enhancement Advisory Board and the City Council both felt like it was worth the expense, just because of the connection that it's going to make and the level of amenitization that it'll have going through that natural area. Next slide. So I'll finish up with pedestrian planning before I hand it over to David. And just wanted to, pedestrian planning, you know, we have, there's just a ton of need in the city. And so again, it's all about prioritization. So if we go to the next slide, we'll see a little bit, this is what we affectionately refer to as the donut. So you can see that this is existing sidewalk in the gray. So all the little gray lines in the background, that you can see that we're pretty good in the downtown and the core area. You know, when the city was getting started and when we were building for decades there, sidewalks were important, pedestrian activity was important. However, as we started getting into some of the earlier suburbs, a lot of folks just didn't feel like they were important. People drove their cars a lot, and just to get to places, and sidewalks kind of fell out of vogue for a while, unfortunately, until we started requiring them again. So that the suburbs now, if you look to the northwest and the south, you can see that we're back in the business of building sidewalks as we develop out our suburbs. So that's good, but the problem is we've got that donut there that we have to go back and retrofit. And unfortunately, retrofitting sidewalks is expensive. You know, they say do it right the first time for a reason. It's really expensive to go back in there and re-engineer and kind of tear out, you know, driveways and deal with slopes and put in retaining walls. There's just a lot of, you know, David and I in Public Works can tell you horror stories all day about the difficulties you run into, but that's where we're at. Fortunately, we have some money committed to that. If you can go to the next slide. There's a ton of identified need, and this slide represents just needs that we've identified, whether it be through city staff or calls that we get through, you know, from members of the public, or, you know, through city council members. We keep a database of all these requests, and that goes into our planning. So if we go to the next slide, we can see, we'll layer on here what we've been doing over the past decade or two. So this was when we really first started to really jump on the addition of new sidewalks, or the kind of the retrofitting. The city council said, and it was late in the game in the 2007 bond, they said, you know, sidewalks are important. We're going to commit to adding sidewalks wherever we're doing street work. And so that's what the 2007 bond did, which is why you see the focus on arterials and the residential resurfacing there in the light blue. Those were identified as areas that resurfacing was needed in. And so they went ahead and added sidewalks on one side of the street for those. So if we go to the next one, the 2017 bond, as I said, has a more, I guess, sophisticated approach, because we went through and we identified specifically where those sidewalks would be most valued and most needed. So that's what you see there in the pink. And so, as I mentioned earlier, these were informed by Bike Walk OKC. We had identified projects which we then put into the bond, and we're working on those now. So they're not necessarily associated with any kind of street project. They're just on their own, sidewalk. facilities. So we go to the next slide. Oh, there we are. Yeah, you can see there are a few that are funded through the kind of random, I guess, funding sources that you can kind of see in the dark green. The next slide. And there are some that are quite a few actually that were funded through MAPS 3. So that helped fill in a lot of the network, and those tended to focus on the arterials, which is important. And the next slide. And then here are additional pieces of the network, and you can see these tend not to be on the arterials. They're more kind of in neighborhoods and districts, getting people from place to place. As Bike Walk OKC recommends, Bike Walk OKC was all about these pedestrian priority areas and helping people in areas where walkability is kind of what we call eminently walkable areas, where you have, commercial and residential and, parks and, hospitals or whatever it might be, all those land uses in close proximity. So it makes it desirable to have a walkable area. And so we focused on those areas to get sidewalks in first. And we also focused on, which is why you see they're kind of spread around here, we focused on getting people to transit stations. So building sidewalks within close proximity to transit stops, and also close proximity to schools and parks. So if we go to the next slide, that's kind of everything. So you can see we're making good progress. Still a long ways to go. However, we could do an entire MAPS on just sidewalks and not be finished. That gives you just kind of a order of magnitude of the level of work that needs to be done. So if we continue on to the next slide, I mentioned these. I got ahead of myself and mentioned these pedestrian priority areas, and you can kind of see them on the map there in those kind of orange red polygons, and there are 10 of them. And like I said, they're focused on these eminently walkable areas where, based on the land use analysis that I mentioned earlier, but also on the need, people's need for walkability, areas that maybe don't have as much car ownership as other areas. That was a consideration. You can also see the other areas on that map where we had the parks and the schools that we looked at. So real quick, we'll go through. The next slide is the PPAs, or the pedestrian priority areas. You can get a closer look at those. So they're kind of clustered in the core and some of the first suburban areas that the city had. Next slide, we're looking at connections to schools. So as I mentioned a second ago, we looked at every school, and we would like to have a quarter mile or so area within proximity of each school so the kids can get there safely and easily. So as you can see, there are a lot of schools, and on the next slide, you can see there are a lot of parks that have the same need. And then on the next slide, you can see there are a lot of transit stations that have the same need. And so it's all about priorities. As I mentioned, because there's so much need, we have to rank all of those and in kind of the same manner, the likelihood that people would walk to that destination, the level of car ownership, just the level of need. And that's how we've prioritized those and funded those up to this point. We've only been able to fund a small amount of all those bubbles you just saw. So again, looking forward to MAPS 4 to help us really build a lot more of that needed sidewalk. So next slide is cost estimates. So the sidewalk costs are actually, this is a little older. So the costs are actually a little bit more now. They just keep going up as we every year goes by. So it's more like it's actually north of 100 per linear foot, 100 to 115 per linear foot. And the cost per mile is about 530,000 to 610,000. And some of that is just because, like I mentioned earlier, it's, you know, a lot of this sidewalk is just difficult to install. There's a lot of grade issues and, you know, driveways that have to be rebuilt and right of way that has to be acquired. And a lot of times we're putting in sidewalks where we kind of did the easy part already. And so across the street, we have to, now we have to build the hard part in a lot of these cases. And that just can be really expensive. So with that, I'll take any questions you might have, and then we'll hand it off to David for streetlights.
Any questions of Jeff? Thank you so much. You covered a tremendous amount, and all those pieces fitting together are really important, I think, for us to understand the full range of what you're trying to accomplish.
No
Teresa, I'm sorry, Teresa, this is Kevin Guinair. I'm sorry, I couldn't get unmuted in time. Just wanted to ask Jeff a quick question about the bike trails, and you know, I live way south. I'm in Ward 5, as far south Oklahoma City as you can be, and tons and tons of bikers out there, bicyclists, which is great, but there's nowhere for them to ride safely, and they get on a lot of 2-lane roads that are heavily traveled, and but I don't see a lot of focus on your map that far south. Is that something that, I mean, I don't know how it is on the north side relative to what we see, and most of our groups probably come out of Norman and Moore, but there are literally groups and groups of them every weekend in the evenings. So how is it decided? I know you said you did some surveying on bicyclists and all of that, but I drive from downtown to home, you know, back and forth to work every day. I go down Walker. I see nobody using those bike lanes. Rarely do I see somebody using those bike lanes. So why was that the focus?
So the goal was to start downtown. You know, as you know, Project 180 put some bike lanes in the downtown area, and that's where people are most likely to cycle, given the density. You know, if you ride it downtown, you'll see more people cycling, and in Midtown and so forth. And so we're building the network from there, going north, south, east, and west. And the Walker, so that was designated as a bike lane in Plan OKC, a bike facility, a tier 1 bike facility with, you know, the delineators and everything. And what Plan OKC or Bike Walk OKC says is that anytime we resurface one of these streets that's in the plan, we're going to go ahead and add that bike facility. So that was why Walker was built when it was, because it was scheduled for a resurfacing. So it just makes sense to go ahead and restripe it and add the delineators at that time. And so, and it also so happens that Walker comes, it's actually 1 block away. That last block they're still working on. It connects right into downtown and all the way down to the Grand Boulevard, which is where the traffic is too high to continue an on-street facility. So
I'm sorry.
We know that
that's too high further south. Is that what you're saying?
What's that?
When you get to Grand is where it stops, but nothing goes further south.
Exactly. So once you get to Grand, the way the plan is structured is you need to take Grand and then go south. And we don't have these facilities built yet, but it's planned to be on May Avenue. So that's a big expensive project that we would like to do to get people south, so that so those folks, you know, south, just in the area that's west of Moore, can actually, you know, get to that trail and head north if they want to, and utilize the rest of the city's trail system along the river and so forth. There's also a funded on-street facility that's going to be on Southeast 59th Street. So that is one where we had some funding and we got additional funds through ACOG, through federal funds, to make that happen. That's one of the rare situations where we would actually put a tier 1 facility on an arterial. But in that case, the traffic counts are low enough, there's enough space, we'll make it safe, and you can get from the south side all the way out riding on that to the new trail around the lake. So that's kind of the plan in terms of what's funded right now and what we hope to get funded soon that will help out the south side. Because you're right, I mean, the network right now of trails is, tends to be north of the river. That's just kind of the way it was planned initially. But we'd like to get going on some projects to the south for sure. And that Southeast 59th connecting to the new trail out there is kind of the next one. And we'll also have additional facilities going south, on-street facilities going south on Robinson, for example. And we're gonna build that as far as we can, but it will eventually go down to the city border of Moore. So that's kind of in the works. I'm not sure exactly how far we're going to be able to get with current funding. Does that answer your question? Is there any other?
Yeah, sort of. I just know we have a huge density out further south, and that's just a gap that may just take a long time to get to. But like I said, there's just a ton of traffic out there that way. And not to keep this a downer, I do want to congratulate on the sidewalk activity. The increased amount of walkers that we see going down the sidewalk on Western is tremendous. The problem we've got down here more than anything, this may not be your world, but trees growing out of the sidewalk, big weeds. Who's responsible for that? I mean, there's a lot of that's undeveloped property, and it doesn't get maintained very well. And I've seen some panels that are popping up and things like that, but overall, the use of it is really, really picked up.
Yeah, it's normally the property owner's responsibility to take care of the maintenance of the right of way, the area between the curb and the property lines. Right. So, yeah, and unfortunately, that's all too common.
Well, I still like the sidewalk project. It's really, really good. Thank you. Thanks, Teresa.
You betcha. Other questions for Jeff? All righty. Thank you so much. That was really, really great. So I think
anytime
you're going to take it from here.
Yeah, these last few slides I'll handle here. This was originally part of the presentation Eric Winger, the Public Works Director, did. So I'll try to cover this ground. Next slide, Carrie. So streetlights typically give you, security in the urban areas and extend the outdoor activity and safety for drivers and riders and pedestrians like we were just discussing. Next slide. The city is working with OG&E right now, and there's a lot of LED upgrades that are ongoing. You may have seen some of those. So this first slide shows you some of the different types, or one of the different types of lights that we have. This is basically a district light. You can see that the mast arm and the globe is a little different. And just to give you a sense of numbers for street lights, the city has about 27,000 street lights, and then another 7,000 lights that are on the highways that all have to be maintained and watched after. They're owned and operated by OG&E, but the city is becoming an integral part of that. Next slide. Another kind of light that we have are these shorter globe type lights that you'll see in the Paseo district up on 23rd Street. Next slide. And then your traditional street lights that you're used to seeing, we call those Cobra heads. A lot of those lights specifically are the ones that are being upgraded to LEDs. So I told you this was going to be fast. Next slide, Carrie. This presentation originally talked about $1.5 million to get an extra 500 lights and maintain these lights. But ultimately what was put into the resolution is $4 million to give the city operating costs for about 1,000 lights for about 10 years. And the reason being is that as OG&E upgrades to LEDs and as they replace poles, there's a cost to the city that would come straight out of the general fund. And this helps kind of bolster that cost that's going to be hitting the general fund. So $4 million for 10 years to help with about 1,000 lights. So I don't know if there's going to be a whole lot of decisions or anything done on this other than just funds that are sent to an account, but we'll just have to work our way through this. There's a need for some studies to actually identify where all the streetlights are. You can imagine how many streetlights there are, and I don't think that those are specifically on a GIS map, and that's what we'd like to see. So that study is soon to happen, and a review of the entire system is happening. So that's it as far as the light portion of this. I'll try to answer any questions. Like I said, this was originally given by Public Works. The light portion of it isn't nearly as exciting as the trails and sidewalks and bike lanes, but if you have any questions, I'll try to answer them.
Any questions?
Yes. So you had talked about not street lights, but what about the highway lights? Are those part of this?
The highway lights are still, there's kind of a transfer, I believe, going on as far as maintenance on those lights, and all of this maintenance stuff falls on Public Works. I know that there's a considerable problem with theft of the wiring for the highway lights, and there's a active campaign to try and get that stopped, to try and convert from copper to aluminum, which isn't nearly as valuable and desirable for recyclers and thefts. And there's just so many. As I said, there being 47,000 lights, it's taken a while to get back to a level that we're used to seeing. For some reason, the theft piece of that just went rampant in the last couple of years. So we're still trying to catch up on that.
Yeah, it's just very interesting with, our previous ice storm that happened last week. It's kind of, I've been hearing a lot about electricity and how our infrastructure is not the best that it should be. That's very old. So it's just very interesting how it all ties in with the street lights, the highway lights, and everything else that goes on.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's all connected. It's a big, gigantic spider web. David, I did have a question. So, and just for clarification, I know in the transportation plan, as it relates to upgrading bus stops and some of those centers, that lighting on both existing stands as well as some of the new transportation spots would be included. But this is different, right? So those lights are only part of the transportation plan. These lights are completely separate.
I assume so. I'll have to look at it a little more myself, but any lighting that is for any kind of bus stops is separate from this. So this is your standard street lights, like either the short globe ones or the tall Cobra heads.
I just remember in that plan, in the transportation plan, there was both lighting for the bus stops, but also street lighting around the bus stop. So yeah, we'll look at that. But my assumption is, based on this information, there's no way that it can include all of that. So good. We've got some more lighting coming.
Yep.
Okay. Any other questions for David on the light project, or for Jeff on the bike lanes plan? Fantastic. Okay. Well, I'm sorry.
I just wanted to know if maybe anything would be allocated for the Oklahoma River and then Lake Draper, because I know last time I went to visit Lake Draper and it was pretty late. I mean, it was 8 o'clock, sun had gone down, but it was pretty dark out there. So I didn't know if possibly any lights are in the works for that area as well.
Really difficult to get lights along the Draper Trail because there's not a lot of infrastructure out there. We do have some solar lights that are, I think, in some parking lots. So, that's something maybe we could look at. It's always a matter of cost, replacing batteries and solar lights. And for some reason, they get vandalized a lot. So that's something we'll look at, but it's not maybe just as easy as putting lights out there.
Okay. We'll put that on the list. Thank you, Brenda. Other questions? Great. Appreciate these presentations. It really helps us, I think, for many of us learning more, even though we may have known pieces, it helps us kind of know broader scale what the projects will encompass, what the needs are. So I guess next we will move to item 6 on our agenda, comments by board, staff, and citizens. So I'd ask if we have any citizen comments.
We do not, Madam Chair.
Okay, great. Any board comments?
Hey, Teresa, this is Bob. We've approved the schedule for next year. What's the status of the extension of the emergency declaration? Are we going to be meeting virtually or in person?
Okay. Thank you for asking. That was a perfect segue. And I think David is going to give us a little bit more information on planning, on what we're planning for starting in our next December meeting. David?
Yeah, thank you. The governor's or the legislative proclamation or legislative action ends on the 15th. So anything starting on the 16th has to be back in person. We're not allowed to do these public meetings via video conference. So we will be, I say back, MAPS 3 be back into the city council chambers. We will have our first meeting in city council chambers. I will tell you that the council chambers has gone through a remodel. It was actually planned before the COVID-19 situation hit, but there has been some additional things done for that because council and all the different groups that meet in there. So there's plexiglass dividers that have been placed in there, and there's some cleaning protocols. You'll be receiving the rules. Mark will be sending you that stuff, but I can send you pictures of the area, or I'll give you a personal tour of the area if you are concerned and want to see the area. But we'll be in person for the first time in council chambers next month.
Right. And so David, because I know a number of the CAB members have not ever accessed the horseshoe side. They've only been on the audience side. So will you be providing guidance as to where to go and how to access our seats?
Yes, there are some protocols. So you'll have to come into the south door and have your temperature checked, get a wristband, check in with MAP staff, and we'll make sure that you get to the right place. There'll be a lot of people there to help you and guide you through this. The good thing is that you won't have to have those 2 devices for your PrimeGov voting and all that stuff. It's all right. It'll be right in front of you, and we'll be able to talk in person. Again, I offer, if any of you want to tour the place, just email me. We'll set up something and I'll take you over there and we can look at it, or I can just send you pictures of what the situation is.
Okay. Thank you, David. Thank you for walking us through that. Any other comments, board comments or staff comments?
I have one other comment, and starting next month, we'll start providing you with a brief summary of how we're doing with ADG and with the implementation plan. So we just really got that kicked off and didn't have a whole lot to report, but we'll start reporting on that, and you'll see that this meeting starts to build more than just these presentations.
Okay.
I did have a comment or a question actually in regards to bike lanes. Is there anything that the community can access where we can see the current bike lanes that are available, especially going back to what Kevin mentioned about the connection with South Oklahoma City and, trying to get downtown or even to the north side. I think sometimes there may be some bike lanes or connections there already available, but maybe we don't know of them. And so I'm just wondering if maybe there's something that we can access or that, the community can access.
Yeah, you should be able to access the master plans on okc.gov. I'll send you a link to that. Jeff's already left the meeting, or otherwise he can give you the exact answer, but I'll send you something on that. I'll send the whole.
if you would, yeah, send it to all of us. Okay. Other questions or comments? Okay, well, seeing none, want to thank everybody for joining us today. Appreciate you. Wishing you all regained electricity, continued health and happiness, a good, safe Thanksgiving, and we will come back together in person safely in December. Okay. All right. Thanks, everybody. Take care.
Take care, everybody.
Thanks, all.
Thank you.
Thank you. You too. Thank you very much.
Bye.